expectation that he was going to be here was going to make it an even better night, but as it is, still going to be a ripping Group 1 final for the maturity and also for the stayers as well.
Now, you've been the primary voice of greyhound racing down here in Victoria the last couple of years, I guess you'd say, but just talk us through where you've come from in your calling background, because you sort of, I don't want to say popped up out of obscurity, but it's been a bit of a meteoric rise over the last couple of years, hasn't it?
Well, it has, and I mean, you couldn't predict anything like this was ever going to happen, and I honestly never ever thought that much was ever going to come my calling. I just started calling trials, harness trials, and then got the opportunity to call a couple of race meetings. And then from there I got asked to call the greyhounds and started doing that, and it's only been 3.5 years, which is just silly to think how far I've come in that short amount of time. But got fast-tracked and loving it, and it's the best job in the world.
We've heard your voice in some of the biggest races around the calendar over the last couple of years. What's been your highlight?
Oh, look, I love calling the Melbourne Cups. They've been really good. The Phoenix last year was awesome because we had a blowout result in that race, and it was a great spectacle, and the crowd that night was enormous. I mean, a lot of the race meetings you go to, there's not many people there, but when you get to those big nights and there's a big crowd and there's a buzz, it's awesome. And I'm really looking forward to the spring and the summer. And the better races and the bigger races, and basically really starts tonight.
You talk about the Phoenix last year, and obviously as a caller you want to go into these Group 1s having a bit of preparation around it. I'm sure you've got a few ideas about what you're going to say if one of the favourites is to lob, but when something like that happens with Scalacci, did you have anything prepared in case there was a blowout, or was that just passion alone?
Oh, it literally was just passion. I mean, I do think, I'd be a fool if I didn't think of certain lines to sort of pull out at different times, and I've got a few sort of sitting there in the back of my mind ready to use if I ever need them. But I mean, that race there was just, no one could have possibly scripted what was going to happen there, and a lot of, as I've said a number of times, you just got to see it and say it. You can't sort of expect to be able to predict anything in this game, and we saw that last week with Palawa King. You can't script greyhound racing, so you've just got to see it and say it.
That was one of the best runs and best calls that I've heard for quite a long time. But you started off in the harness racing world to now be the voice of greyhound racing. You must have an affinity with the industry now. And just what is it about the dogs that you love so much these days?
Oh, look, I've been involved, for a long time going back. My dad used to be involved in the industry a very long time ago. So I had that little grounding in there, and then was sort of lost to it for a while, a long time, in fact, and obviously involved in harness racing and that aspect of it. But the people in the industry that are just brilliant. They a number of people come up to me and thank me for their calls, or they give me advice on names and things like that, because you've got to they're the ones that put on the show. I provide a bit of colour for it, but the people in the industry have been fantastic to me, and there's a lot of the provincial clubs have really looked after me. And I've been very fortunate to be in this position.
We'll make it quick because the next race is coming up, but who's your favourite dog that you've called so far?
Oh, look, this Wow She's Fast is probably the one, and I mean, she came along when I really just started out, and she'd obviously already won a Phoenix, but when she won the launching pad, that was really the sign that she was one for me. And the other one's Hector Fawley. I mean, he's sort of been around since I started as well. And some of whose races have just been crazy. So they're probably the two that I have a real soft spot for.
Stanley is a lot of people's favourites. And finally, before I let you go, your tip for the Group 1 Maturity Classic later tonight?
I've gone with Vincent Bale. I just think that he's on the up, and he might be peaking at exactly the right time. He'll need a bit of luck, but I think he's the one to go for.
Well, there you have it, boys. Vincent Bale for Dan, coming up in the Maturity Classic later on, and that's a look behind the scenes up here in the callers box.